Now we move on to the second chapter. This chapter has two parts. The first part deals with the factors responsible for growth of nationalism in India, and the second part deals with the smaller associations formed before the formation of the Indian National Congress. The 1857 revolt failed to throw off the British rule, but what the revolt was able to achieve was a sudden rise in the feeling of nationalism among Indians. First of all, let's quickly see what this term nationalism means. Is it same as patriotism? No, it differs slightly. Patriotism is love for the land where an individual is born and brought up. But nationalism is a sense of belonging. It's a shared feeling that we belong to the same country. It is an identity. So when you say I'm an Indian, it could mean two things. One, you belong to the land called India, and two, you believe in the ideals that the nation of India stands for. Now, believe it or not, during the 19th century, the common Indians did not have this feeling of nationalism that we are Indians. People had their loyalties to their local provinces based on its rulers, religion, language, culture, etc. So in effect, India was a nation of many nations. But the Britishers controlled the entire India. So in order to fight this common enemy, Indians needed to let go of their narrow regional identities and adopt a broader pan-Indian identity. The period after the 1857 revolt saw the growth of nationalist consciousness among Indians. The mentality of Indian people underwent a profound change. They found a new confidence in them. What the 1857 revolt had demonstrated was that it is not impossible to defeat the Britishers. All it needed was a degree of unity and determination. Now, what brought about this growth of nationalism is widely debated. Of course, the British scholars give the credit to the British rule, as according to them, India was never a unified entity. It is only because of the British rule India was unified as a nation. English historian R. Coupland called nationalism in India a child of British Raj. But broadly speaking, there were a number of factors that caused a wave of nationalism in India. Let's see these factors one by one. First, the political, administrative and economic unification of India. Geographically, the British India Empire extended from Assam in the east to Khyber Pass in the west and from the Himalayas in the north to the Cape Camorin in the south. This area was larger than that over which the Mauryans and the Mughals ruled. The British established a highly centralized administration, and all the people of India were now subjected to common laws and institutions. The district administration throughout India came under the Indian Civil Service. A unified judicial system and codified laws worked for the whole of the country. Another important thing to note here is that change in Governor General or Viceroy did not change the essential character of British administration. Otherwise, earlier, change in the ruler at Delhi would change the entire system of administration in India. What was the result of this unification? People all over India now had a common enemy. So a feeling of oneness was generated among the people in India. The second cause for uniting Indians was racialism of the British. The Britishers held themselves as racially superior. The law courts and police were racially biased. They even created exclusive spaces for themselves in trains, public places, etc. Such humiliation of Indians on a day-to-day basis united them in a common cause. The next cause was, of course, the economic exploitation. The Britishers systematically turned Indian economy into a colonial economy. Raw materials were taken from India at cheaper prices and machine-made British goods were sold across Indian markets. The traditional economic structure of India was destroyed. New inventions like train, telegraph, etc. were all used by the British to strengthen their economic control over India. Agriculture was commercialized, and stress on cultivation of plantation crops had adverse consequences on Indian agriculture. This resulted in increased poverty among peasants. What about the middle class Indians who did not support the 1857 revolt? Initially, they hailed the British rule as a blessing as it provided them with modern education. But the educated Indian youth was largely unemployed and was being treated inferior to their European counterparts. So their economic hardship united them against the Britishers. All of this was put forth before people by Dadabhai Naoroji in his book Poverty and Un-British Rule in India. He exposed the various methods used by the British to drain the wealth of India. He suggested that in order to gain freedom from this economic exploitation, India needs to get political independence. The next reason was influence of Western education. The English-educated Indian youth was influenced by the spread of liberal and radical thoughts of J.S. Mill, Rousseau, Voltaire, Bentham, etc. The literature on French Revolution, American Revolution, and the ideals of nationalism, liberty, and self-governance inspired the educated Indians. Indian students who traveled to Britain could clearly see the difference in living conditions of India and Britain. The next important cause of growth of nationalism was the role of press. Newspapers like Indian Mirror, The Hindu, Patriot, Kesari, Amrita Bazar Patrika wrote extensively about the exploitative nature of the British rule. They helped in spreading nationalist feelings by stimulating public opinion, organizing movements, and discussing the ideas of liberty, democracy, and independence. Another major cause was the rediscovery of India's past. What Britishers had managed to do was convince Indians that they were not capable of self-rule, that they were backward and they needed the British rule to be civilized. But researches by scholars like Max Muller and Roth and excavations by archaeologists like Cunningham revealed India's ancient culture and civilization. The Vedas and Upanishads were hailed as excellent literary works. Ashoka, Chandragupta, Akbar and Shivaji were hailed as national heroes. This gradual reawakening of India's glorious past helped Indians discover a national heritage in their art, architecture, philosophy, and science. During this period, a series of nationalist literature flourished. This literature helped Indians understand their past. Bankim Chandra's book Anand Math strongly stirred nationalist feelings among Bengalis. Vishnu Shastri Chipurunkar's journal Nibandhamala in Marathi, Lakshminath Besbarowa's writings in Assamese, Subramanya Bharati in Tamil, and Bharatendu Harishchandra in Hindi inspired Indians. Muslim poets such as Altaf Hussain Hali, Shibli Nomani, and Kaikobad reminded Indians of their glorious past. Lastly, some of the British policies greatly angered the people in India and increased anti-government sentiments. Out of these, the Vernacular Press Act and opposition to the ILBERT Bill are two important events. In 1878, Lord Lytton passed the Vernacular Press Act. This act brought a number of restrictions on the newspapers written in Indian vernacular languages. The act was meant to control seditious writings in these newspapers. Any such seditious material was confiscated by the government using this act. Lord Lytton also passed the Arms Act, which prohibited Indians from carrying weapons of any kind without licenses. The problem was the act excluded the British men from this prohibition. Then came Lord Ripon's ILBERT Bill in 1883. Lord Ripon is known as the Good Viceroy of India. He is most known for his resolution of 1882, which was meant to give Indians the right to local self-government. He even repealed Lord Lytton's Vernacular Press Act in 1881. The ILBERT Bill was also a good bill from the Indian people's perspective. The bill allowed Indian judges to hear cases against British subjects. Earlier, Europeans would get a lenient punishment when compared to Indians. So this bill tried to bring fairness to the judicial system. But this was opposed by the Europeans in India, and the bill had to be withdrawn. What this entire controversy showed Indians was that the British policy of justice and fairness was not applicable wherever the British interests seemed to be threatened. So whatever little faith the Indians had in the benevolence of the British rule was drained away by this incident. All of these factors caused rise of nationalist consciousness among Indians. Awakened Indians started forming associations to put forth their demands before the government. This period saw Indians forming smaller associations to eventually forming a pan-Indian association called the Indian National Congress in 1885. In the next video, we shall see some of these smaller associations formed by the Indians.